Okay. Recording video. Okay, so today, welcome to the 1st annual me reading paper, digital paper in this case. And today I'm going to be reading Old School Essentials. I'm not going to be doing verbatim, but it's going to be a little bit more in-depth than like a cursory overview. And the reason I want to do this is just to highlight kind of what I like about these systems, this OSR old school renaissance, if you will, RPG tabletop thing. If you are a D&D player and you're new to the hobby, Dungeons and Dragons might be the only thing you know, the only game you know. It's very possible. Or you might have heard of other things, but other games, maybe not tried them. You know, Pathfinder, Shadowrun, stuff like that. Cyberpunk. You've probably heard of these things at least if you've been in the hobby for a little while. But of course, the history of Dungeons and Dragons goes back all the way to the 70s. All the way back to miniature wargaming, Napoleonic wargaming, medieval wargaming, which eventually led into Dave Arneson adding a hero element where you could play as one individual soldier on a battlefield, and then introducing slowly kind of fantasy monsters and tropes from popular fiction at the time. Tolkien and different fantasy fiction like that. Jack Vance, or is it Jack Vance? I never read Vance, actually. I've never read Vancian stories before. Conan the Barbarian, H.P. Lovecraft, those are the ones I'm familiar with and that I enjoy out of all the Appendix N material, which is kind of like a list of things Gary Gygax had printed, I believe, in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which were suggestions for fantasy role-playing. So, what we're looking at here, is essentially the first version of Dungeons and Dragons that was very kind of exploded at the time. This is like based on the BX Moldvay Dungeons and Dragons, the original box set. BX meaning basic and why isn't it coming to my head? Expert. Basic and expert sets. And what Old School Essentials Classic Fantasy is trying to do here is reorganize that material in a way that is far more readable and accessible. So what I have in front of me here is the PDF for the rules tome. I do own this PDF. I'm waiting for the hardback to arrive, actually. And this compiles several books in their Old School Essentials Fantasy line. What they had done initially was split it into several books. One for players, one for GMs, one for monsters, one for magic items and things like that. And spells, which is a really cool way to do it. That modularity is fantastic, especially if these books were in normal print that you could go buy them at any store, which you cannot, generally. Pardon me. It would be great as a player to go in, grab the player's book. That's all you really need. If you look at the climate that we have now for D&D books, right? Pathfinder, for example, they have a core rule book. What does that mean? I mean, it's a player's book. It's kind of got a bit of GM stuff in there, but not all of it. It doesn't have any monster stat blocks. So it's a core rule book. There's no standard. Like it's quite misleading. Dungeons and Dragons still probably does it best, but even that's a little misleading. You've got your player's handbook, but really it could be split into two books. It could be split into character creation and then playing the game, the game rules. It really could be two separate things because it is. It's both the rules of the game. So as a DM, I need the player's handbook, right? I have the DM guide and it gives me other rules that I also need, but I need the player's handbook because that's where the core rules are. Unless I just want to download the rules or the SRD, and use that. I can do that too, technically speaking. But if I want access to everything as a DM, I need these 3 core books. A monster manual. That's arguable. As a DM, I create 90% of my own encounters anyways. But, especially for new DMs, that's indispensable. If you don't know how the game works, you're not going to be creating stat blocks, obviously. You have no idea what's going to kill parties and how to balance things and all that. It's impossible if you're new to the hobby. So that's indispensable. And then I need the player's handbook because I need to know how characters are created. I need to know the rules of the game, obviously, because I'm going to be adjudicating that. I'm going to be running the game. And then I need the DM guide or the Game Master's guide, whatever it is, because I need to have all the extra information on how do I be a GM in the first place, or DM. How does that even work? And get those extra tools in there as well at my disposal. So there's a lot that goes into this. And Old School Essentials, recognized that, and Necrotic Gnome recognized that, and decided, let's take a rule set that's tried and proven and true, and right now kind of in vogue again. All these old school games are coming back. People are getting interested in them. The hobby's bigger than it ever has been, which is amazing. So they're saying, let's get this into a package that's digestible. I can go right now to Drive Through RPG. Wait, what is this? Test widgets, record? Never mind. I can go right now to Drive Through RPG. I can buy BX rules for probably $20 for both the basic and expert box, right? I mean, all that was in that box is a couple of crappy dice and a bunch of little booklets. So it's no different if I have that or I have a PDF. It's not like today where the beginner boxes for like Pathfinder have all this stuff in them. They're like overloaded with stuff, basically. So things have changed. Times are changing. And now we're getting more detailed in these products. But back then, it was pretty simple. So, Old School Essentials, Classic Fantasy is a recreation of BX to basically be more accessible today, right? So let's go over the table of contents quick. We have an introduction. It's going to talk about the general points about this. Player character, how to create characters, simple enough. And then you got the classes. As you can see, you won't get into it yet, and I'll talk about it soon, but Cleric, Dwarf, Elf, Fighter, Halfling, right? Some of you are probably already familiar with what I'm going to get to here anyways. Advancement talks about advancing your characters, getting better, high-level play. And then equipment, vehicles and mounts, magic, cleric spells, magic user spells. Adventuring, this is all good for GM stuff. Hired help, strongholds, monsters, encounter tables, NPC encounters, running adventures. Treasures, magic items, sentient swords, author's notes, indexes. So this is everything, essentially, in one book to play a game, to play an old school game, right? So, introduction. What is this game? What's Old School Essentials? Well, it's a role-playing game of fantasy adventure where players work together to overcome fearsome monsters, sinister plots, and deadly traps in search of wealth, power, and glory. And I mean, yes, this is the nature or the tone of old D&D. Experience points were gold at one time in the hobby, and so you'd get experience by gathering gold and getting treasures. So the point was literally to go find treasure. How do you do that? Go in dungeons. It's a dungeon crawler. That's the nature of the game. It's an old school role-playing game styled after the beloved games of the 1970s and 80s. It's a relatively rules-light game, a streamlined rule set, and it's modular. And what they mean by modular, it can be expanded, for one thing, by adding all kinds of material. There's a whole library probably of material that you could plug into this very easily, just based on what information they give you in this book. And of course it's modular because you can also buy the split book version of it as well, so that it's quite literally modular. You just take the pieces that you want and get rid of the ones you don't want. New to role-playing games. The rules do not demonstrate how a role-playing game actually works in practice. So some recommendations for those who have no experience: dive in and play. Watch other people playing. There are many live streams and YouTube channels online. Yes, very different time. We don't need examples of RPG play in our books anymore, in my opinion. I mean, we're so past that in terms of those examples are so bad. I almost want to just sit here and read one because of how awful they sound. It doesn't sound like real human beings playing a game most of the time. It's It's really cringy and hard to read. Are you new to old school games? The newer RPGs tend to work from a different set of design principles and have somewhat different play expectations than old school games, yes. Players who are familiar with newer RPGs but not old school style of play may find the following documents useful. And it gets into Principia Apocrypha, which I have read. That's an interesting one. Quick primer for old school gaming. Okay, so we've got old school games such as Old School Essentials. The rules are not intended to cover all possible eventualities. This might as well be the most important part of this entire book right here. The rules are not intended to cover all possible eventualities. It's not advanced Dungeons and Dragons, okay? The referee must be ready to apply judgment to resolve any unexpected situations that arise. And that's kind of where AD&D stemmed from, was people saying, like, I don't understand. What do I do when I'm swimming? What do I, all these different questions for checks. And Gygax basically said, we'll just create this massive, unwieldy book that'll just cover everything. But that's not, necessary, and this book will exemplify that. It has all the rules, the most fundamental elements of the game of the genre as follows: perils and adventure. Let's talk about wilderness. Forbidden forests as old as the world, swamps haunted by the spirits of ancient tribes, wild mountain ranges, the uncharted reaches of the high seas. Any outdoor space where peril and adventure can be met is classified as wilderness. Fair enough. I'm not going to go over all of these, but dungeons. Forsaken ruins hiding long-forgotten treasures, primal caverns where strange beasts dwell, subterranean cities of alien splendor and unimaginable wealth. Any indoor subterranean space where peril and adventure can be met is classified as a dungeon. So dungeons are caves, dungeons are buildings, dungeons are dungeons. There's all kinds of things that can be a dungeon in this game. It assumes a setting where the PCs come into contact with the fantastic, otherworldly, weird, and wonderful. Treasure, finding lots of gold, fabulous material, magical items, monsters, terrible creatures older than time, fearsome mythical beasts, chimeric biological experiments, tribes of beasts like half-men, beings from otherworldly dimension. Such inhuman creatures lurk in the wilderness and in dungeons, guarding wondrous treasures. Forbidden practice of dark sorcery, rituals to invoke the gods, monsters summoned from weird dimensions, sites of eldritch power. Magic is a powerful tool that may be wielded by player characters, but also by their enemies. And then sentient species. Dwarves and subterranean kingdoms, bestial humanoids, mutants twisted by magic. While humans are typically the most widespread species in the game, we'll get to that, other humanoids of equal or perhaps greater intelligence may exist, right? Intelligent species that are available as player characters are termed demi-humans. Okay. Terminology. They go over the terminology of dice, which is fine. D20, do it D12. We know all this. Multi-dice rolls, 3d6. We're getting into pretty, rudimentary stuff here, but notice how everything is just like so stripped down. This is not like a whole page here to explain what the dice are. I mean, it does assume some basic familiarity with the hobby. There is no question about that. People picked up way worse than this book and figured it out way back in the 70s, right? They picked up BX, which is way harder to read than this, and they figured it out back then. But what I am saying is, there is some assumption of reasonable familiarity with these dice and with how these things kind of generally work. So they've just gone down and they, simplified it into bullet points, essentially, here, and it's fantastic. We've got game terminology, referee, players, player, PC, blah, 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 blah. And so this is great. I love the terminology section. It's just one page, right? Not even a whole spread, one page, and we've got it all down. And then this book talks about the 5 modules, which are essentially all merged in one book in this case. The core rules, character options, spells, monsters, and treasures. Okay? And then it mentions that down here. It's a compilation of the old school rules modules. Other books in the old school essentials line add extra content and options to tailor the game to different settings, genres, and types of play. There are other books in this. There's the advanced books, which bring it up to speed with advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They add classes separate from race, because yes, class and race were both the same thing in this version of the game. They add all kinds of options and advanced rules and whatnot. I'm not that interested in that version of it, but it's out there, House rules. None of the rules presented in this book are to be taken as gospel. If the players and referee wish, any rule may be expanded, altered, or removed. Such tweaks to the rules are known as house rules. Fair enough. I mean, that's, to me, quintessentially Dungeons and Dragons is house rules. You know, it's kind of messing with what's there. As long as you understand what's there well enough to mess with it properly and not completely break the game. You know, your objective as a DM is entertaining and creating the best experience that you possibly can. And I think that your ability to facilitate that will largely be based on how you can improvise things and how you can adjudicate and make rulings. It's very, very important. Mix and match. Talks about mixing and matching rules. Roll your own. And so again, with a long time familiarity with Dungeons and Dragons, you can take pretty much any published material and you can plug it into this game. No problem. And if you're that familiar with the system, and it's a very simple system, you know, compared to many others today, you can easily make your own stuff. I do it all the time. I think most DMs do. You know, maybe not all of them. I'm sure a lot of people are specifically just run pre-built adventures, but I mean, you got to be improvising somewhere, even there, right? Okay, so Old School Essentials is 100% compatible with the 1981 edition of the world's most popular fantasy RPG, commonly known as Basic Expert. Any material published for Basic Expert can be used directly with Old School Essentials. And more than that, I'll keep that in mind now. Second edition can be used with this because THACO is present here. Third edition stuff could be used with this because there's ascending AC. You know, you'd have to cut some stuff out or work some stuff around, but anything is pretty much compatible with this, and that's what's beautiful about it. So it's 100% faithful restatement of rules, character options, spells, monsters, and treasures from the classic Basic Expert game. It is worth noting that errors in the original have not been slavishly reproduced, and an effort has been made to correct obvious mistakes. So it's an improved but identical version, right? Let's just make it work out some of the kinks that were there, rearrange the text, but let's keep this game intact. That's their idea. You're talking about other editions, adaptation guidelines, blah, 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 blah. So, the first piece of artwork, I'm not going to linger on the artwork long, and the reason is they have an art-free PDF there, I believe, too. I don't want to spoil this. If you want the art, go buy the book. It's beautiful art, and you should buy the book. It's a beautiful book. You can also get this if you don't want to get it through Necrotic Gnome and have it shipped overseas. Exalted Funeral is a U.S. company, and you can order it from them as well. Game statistics. We're going to skip ahead of some of this stuff. So alignment, hit points, we know all this, essentially. This is where things will get a little bit different. So there's armor class, and the interesting thing is here, in the old D&D, armor class went down. You start at 10, you go down, right? And then you use an attack matrix or a table to figure out what roll you need to hit something or for something to hit you. Here, we also include THACO, which was to hit AC 0, which was a way of simplifying that so you didn't need to use a table anymore. You were still rolling, AC was still descending, but you didn't need a table anymore to figure out how to hit. You had a THACO number instead. And then you'd minus the AC from the THACO, or vice versa. I can't remember now. And that's how you figure out what number you need to roll to hit an enemy. But we also have here ascending AC, optional rule. And it's wonderful. I mean, everybody is used to ascending AC now since 3rd edition. It was shocking when it came out that such a simple change could make such a difference in the way the game is played, frankly. I am not one of these people that's going to defend attack matrices, and THACO, even though I don't find THACO that hard. That's not the point. Ascending AC is far easier to use. So why not, right? And we have that here. So all the ascending AC values are in brackets next to the regular values. So that way you can just plug away and just have an ascending AC game without any modification or any changes, which is really nice. And I mean, it also tells you here, using ascending armor class results in very slightly different attack probabilities than using the traditional approach. But what that also means is you can take anything that is 2nd edition, whatever, pretty much invert the value, and now you have your ascending AC. So if a monster has 5 AC in 2nd edition, for example, I just hit him on a 15. I hit him on a 15, and that's it. It's pretty simple to make that conversion. Is it 100% accurate? No, but it's fine. It's fine. It's all fine. When you're dealing with 1 or 2 numbers in difference, they don't make that much of a difference, statistically speaking. Attack roll to hit AC 0. We kind of went over this. Creating a character. This is the fun stuff. You'll need a character sheet, a sheet of paper on which to record all the information about the new character. We roll his ability scores. Now look at this. Roll 3d6 for each of your character's abilities. That's it. 3d6, not 4d6 drop one. Not a buy-in system. This is hardcore, man. You could have a character that has 3 strength. It is possible. If you roll a character with very poor ability scores, for example, 8 or less in every score or extremely low rating in one ability, the referee may allow you to discard the character and start again. And that's perfectly legitimate to do. But again, it is possible to just play a character that has unimaginably poor stats, depending on how your rolls go. That is far less likely to happen in newer systems, the way that they work. In fact, I just recently got some people on board, and one of the first questions was, can I reroll ones on my ability score rolls? And I'd never actually heard that come up. So that's obviously a house rule someone's done somewhere. But yeah, I mean, that's the case. We're used now to high stats, right? Pathfinder 2e, you don't even roll, and you're always going to end up with an 18 in your primary stat because of the way that the stat bonuses work. Unless you just pick a really nasty, miserable class race combination or whatever. Species combination. What do they call it? Not race. I don't know what it's called now. Ancestry. Choose a class. Select one of the classes available, and there are minimum ability score requirements of some classes. That's the same in D&D 5e with multi-classing. I don't know if there's prereqs for the main classes. I mean, it never came up because my stats were all like 13 and above when I rolled my first 5e character the other night. So it didn't matter if there was prereqs unless they were like 16 or something, which they wouldn't be. Or not, I think the assassin class in the old D&D had some pretty unreasonably high statistics, but I can't remember. Adjustability scores. You may raise the prime requisites of your character by lowering other ability scores. So that's an option here as well. And then attack values, blah, blah, blah. And this is the attack value. The first time you're going to see kind of a matrix here and how the matrices work, right? So if your attack roll is 12, AC hit is 7, etc., right? So you'd need on a 4 AC, you'd need to roll 15. Kind of what I said about, this guy has 5 AC, hit a 15. 4 in this case. And it depends on what system you're used to, because I think one was like on AC 11, and then the other one was on AC 10. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Note saving throws and class abilities. Roll your hit points. And yes, you roll your hit points. You do not start with the maximum number of hit points or your hit die. But you do start with at least 1 hit point, otherwise you start a dead character, which wouldn't make any sense. And there are some systems that allow you to do that, which is hilarious. Choose alignment. Lawful, neutral, chaotic. Known languages. Your intelligence modifier changes how many languages you can know. I think they've gotten rid of that in 5e, if I'm remembering correctly. But I might be wrong. I just started reading it like yesterday. Your character starts to play with 3d6 times 10 gold pieces. And then you can note your armor class. No armor is an AC of 9. Oh, interesting. It's 9. Okay. 9 or 10. Oh, and 10 if you're ascending. Right. Yeah, because it goes down to AC 0. That makes sense. No level in XP. 0 first level. Name a character. Blah, blah, blah. We won't go over this. We know what these prime requisites are. The modifiers are a little bit different. So 13 to 15 is a +1. And it only goes up to +3 here, right? So D&D 5 and Pathfinder, I think, as well. It's +4 at 18. So that's different. Alignment. We don't have to talk about alignment. And then languages. Not much to write home about there. So let's talk about the classes. I'm going to go over these in a little bit more detail. So Cleric. There are no requirements, but the prime requisite is Wisdom. So you want to dump your points into Wisdom. 1d6 hit dice. That's not bad. So you can roll 1d6, and that's your hit points. Maximum level 14. Yes, levels are much lower in the old school games, and you'll see that even more in a couple of pages here. Armor, any including shields, any blunt weapons. You're not allowed sharp weapons as a cleric for whatever reason. It's always been that way. Alignment that's your language. You have an alignment language, like an evil language or whatever, and then common. Combat. Let's talk about divine magic. So a cleric must carry a holy symbol. That's part of their character. Clerics must be faithful to the tenets of their alignment, clergy, and religion. Clerics who fall from favor of their deity may incur penalties. So this is a huge diversion from 5e, and this is really like sign of the time stuff for 5th edition, where we're at as a culture. As a cleric in 5e, you can basically be an atheist, right? But in the old school D&D, you believe in a god and you work for that god. And as soon as you don't, you're in deep shit. If you fall from favor, you can incur penalties. You can lose your powers. All kinds of things can happen based on the DM's, choosing. You have to remain faithful to the god of that world that you're playing in, whatever that god might be. Or if there's multiple gods, you have to choose one and remain faithful to them. And you pray to that god in the game, and that god, is responsible for divine intervention. There's real forces in this game of both good and evil. They're both present. And I find that really interesting. A lot of people I've talked to are against that idea, or they really embrace the new idea, like clerics can be whatever. I want to be an atheist cleric. But I mean, to me, D&D has this sort of black and white, I don't want to say black and white morality, but it has defined lines of what good and evil means. So there is an ethos there. And part of that ethos is that there are demons in this world. Not just monsters. They're not classified as monsters. They have their own classification. They're demons. They come from an evil realm, right? And so there's a good realm, and that's where you get your powers. This kind of black and white monotheism, I guess, is very... It's not even monotheism, because pantheism. There's all kinds of gods in D&D, and there always has been. But it's integral to the system itself. It's part of the mechanics of the game. And that's really interesting. Turning undead, you can invoke the power of the day to repel undead monsters. Player rolls 2d6. You get to turn undead right away. I know in D&D 5, from when I was reading about the cleric, you get like a destroy undead. But you don't get that till later. It affects like monsters with significantly lower challenge ratings than what your level is at. But I haven't looked that far into it, so I might be out to lunch. There might be a turn undead and a destroy undead. Maybe they're different things. Excess rolled hit dice that are not sufficient to affect a creature are wasted. However, at least one undead creature will always be affected on a successful turn, and mixed groups. So there's a bunch of rules here for turning the undead. That's really interesting. And 2d6 is the number of hit dice affected or destroyed. Everything is based on hit dice, and I can't remember if this is 1d8 or 1d6 for the hit dice in Old School Essentials. I think it's 1d8. But essentially, monsters don't have like challenge ratings or levels. They have hit dice. So a monster might be like a one hit die. That just means you roll 1d8, and that's how much health that monster has. So that's kind of what this is referring to here. Cleric level progression. We don't have these weird progressions, like 1 and then 300 and then 600 XP, blah, blah, blah. Everything is much higher, obviously. And experience handouts are much lower, conversely. We have our saving throws against things like wands, poison, breath weapons, etc. So saving throws are not handled the same way either. They're their own stats, and they go up statically as you get better. You get better at saving, but it's a static grid that you're following here. And then we have spells per day. So look at this. This is really interesting. Level 1, no spells per day. You don't start out with spells. You're a cleric. You are specifically there to fight the undead. So there's an emphasis on undead fights, on zombies, on creatures of that nature. And that you're going to be doing battle with them, and that your god is going to be giving you the power to destroy them. So that's really interesting as well. We don't have any spells. We just have our turn undead ability at level 1. Of course, we can attack. And we have got decent fighting power for that. After reaching 9 level, this is another interesting thing about D&D, old D&D. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons have this. 2nd edition have this. A cleric may establish or build a stronghold so long as the cleric is currently in favor with their god. A stronghold may be bought or built at half the normal price due to divine intervention. That's interesting. Once a stronghold is established, the cleric will attract followers, 5d6 times 10 fighters of level 1 to 2, and these troops are completely devoted to the cleric, never checking morale. So this is a game where, as you go up, your status in the world goes up mechanically, not just in roleplay, but mechanically speaking. You are now at a point where people are revering you, they're looking up to you, you've attracted followers, you have essentially henchmen that you can use to your advantage. And that's when the game starts to open up into a different territory where we have larger scale battles and things like that, where we're fighting for territory. This is very much in line with like the old way of playing the game. So your guy doesn't just go into dungeons forever scraping the bottom of the barrel for treasures. Eventually he transcends that. And we get into a different kind of game. And this to me is, I think, what separates the old game from the newer games is, in the newer games, we just get progressively stronger. Our characters get progressively better. And then we have to keep taking on progressively larger and larger challenges. It's like Dragon Ball Z, right? Goku starts fighting a pterodactyl when he's a little kid. That's the first fight he gets into in the show. And he beats it with his stick, right? By Dragon Ball Z, he's fighting aliens on another planet, and their power is so great they can destroy planets and universes and stuff. And it just gets out of control. Shout out to Dragon Ball Z, by the way. I love Dragon Ball Z. I'm not dissing it, but I'm just saying that's what happened. That's the inevitable point. I've said here to somebody recently this week that D&D 5, you start out as Iron Man and you end as Thanos, right? And even that's not accurate enough. You're fighting gods and stuff at a high level in D&D. But in this game, I think it's an emphasis on the impact you have around the world, on the world around you, and then you play a different kind of games. Like when we were playing 2nd edition when I was a kid, it was a different kind of experience out of that. We were running a government. We were talking about like how banks systems would work, because like someone turned a whole city to gold and now bandits were going to come take the gold, and then currency became useless. It was a very different kind of game, but it takes a long time to get there, you know? But we weren't even in dungeons almost ever at a certain point in our game career. And I was talking with a friend, Matt, about this earlier today too, how, you know, I think he said he preferred to end games after 9th level because it just becomes ridiculous. But this system doesn't have that problem necessarily, as long as you grow with the game. And these kind of rules exemplify that. So we got dwarves. This is a class and a race, right? This is both. This is really interesting. 1d8 hit dice, maximum level 12. So you can see here the levels are quite low. We don't have, and this would change later in Dungeons and Dragons, even the original. I think humans could get up to like level 36 eventually. But in the original box sets, it was low levels. We kept it, kept it short. Combat. They can use all types of armor. They can't use longbows or two-handed swords. We're not going to see Gimli wielding the Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII. That's not going to happen, right? Expert miners. Dwarves have a 2 in 6 chance of being able to detect new construction, sliding walls, or sloping passages when searched. Oh, they're like architects, you know? Even I glossed over this one. That's pretty interesting. Detect room traps. They have a 2 in 6 chance of detecting non-magical room traps when searching. So there's a very simple search trap mechanic in the old D&D where you roll a 1d6, and then that determines if you find a trap or not. I think like elves get a 3 out of 6. Dwarves here get a 2 out of 6 chance. Dwarves have infravision, which is not the same as dark vision. And dark vision never was you can see perfectly. Infravision is you can see in black and white for up to 60 feet. But things are still not perfect. You know, it's not like you have perfect vision in the dark. And that's a big problem for many DMs to deal with. Dwarves have a 2 in 6 chance of hearing noises. So they have a decent perception. We don't necessarily have a perception check in the same way. People do these kinds of checks still in the old versions, or they just fudge and they make them up, right? But we're going for target numbers here. There's no like skills, and there's none of this kind of nonsense. And proficiencies didn't come until later either. After reaching 9th level, dwarf can create an underground stronghold. So again, you know, we have these characters that are gaining status in the world. The level progression is different for each class, you might notice, which is interesting. Elf, minimum intelligence 9. There's a minimum for elves. Intelligence and strength are their main primaries. Their maximum level is 10. Elves can only go to level 10, and they have basically retired. Elves are slender, fey demi-humans with pointed ears. We know all this. An elf with at least 13 int and strength gains a 5% bonus to experience. And an elf with an int of at least 16 and a strength of at least 13 receives a plus 10% XP bonus. So that's pretty cool. We have different ways, we have different progressions. We don't have a parallel progression between all the characters here. That's not just in the classes themselves and how they're set up, but also in this case of a bonus that elves get if they meet certain specifications, certain prerequisites. Elf of any level may spend time and money on magical research. They can add new spells to their spellbook and research. Well, thank you. This allows them to add new spells to their spellbook and research other magical effects. When an elf reaches 9th level, they are also able to create magic items. So that's interesting. We have crafting going on here. 9th level is 1 level before retirement, by the way. So they don't get this ability until they're almost done. They're almost out of the game, essentially. And welcome, Lily Beck. Nice to see you. Spell casting. Elves carry spellbooks containing the formula. Thus, the first level elf has 1 spell in their spellbook selected by the referee. So the ref selects, or the DM is the one that selects your spells, okay? And then you go off a spell list and you do that. Today we're just reading Old School Essentials. It is a recreation of the original Dungeons and Dragons in a far more readable form. And I'm just kind of going through it to talk about the differences between this and then the newer RPGs that are out on the market. So elves can use all types of weapons and armor, so they're very versatile that way. They have a 2 in 6 chance of detecting secret doors as well. So I was wrong. It's not 3 in 6, it's 2 in 6. They're completely unaffected by paralysis that ghouls can inflict. And then, of course, they also have infravision and then a chance of hearing noises. So again, they can construct a stronghold in the forest. We have the same thing. We have, at that final couple of levels, these characters are getting ready to settle down. They're getting ready to become lords. They're getting ready to become masters of a territory because of the clout that they've gained through their journeying. You know, and this is why I exemplify and promote people playing pure parties, whether that's of a leaning good alignment or a leaning evil alignment. Because unless you just purposely want to split the party at some point, because at some point that evil lord that's going to create that castle or that tower in Mordor is going to butt heads with the cleric that's going to create a church. You know, it's just not going to work forever. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Fighters. Any armor, including shields, their prime requisite strength, 1d8 hit dice. Fighters are dedicated to mastering arts. Fighters are all humans. That's the other thing, right? We don't have class race separation here. You're a fighter, you're a human. They can use all types of weapons and armor. They can build a castle or stronghold, and then they can get a title, actually, Baron, Baroness, and their maximum level is 4 levels higher than the elf. It's at 14. Okay, so we have another progression chart here. Significantly lower XP to hit other levels, because really they don't have much they can do. They're just a fighter. They just attack, you know. Now, that's a huge sticking point, too, with people that love these new systems. They always talk about all the options and the character creation options. And I agree, it's really fun to build these characters. It's like building a character in a video game. I could just sit there for hours and create characters. But this game assumed you were going to do more than just I attack, I strike. It assumed you were going to descriptively try to do specific things, and that the DM was going to kind of adjudicate that and say, yeah, you can try and swing off that chandelier and hit that guy. It wasn't powers and it wasn't magic spells and all that for every single class like we kind of have now. It was just the creativity of the players was behind what sorts of things you could do, and then the DM would just adjudicate if you could do it or not, right? And now everything is codified, where it's like everything is a skill, everything is a thing. But that being said, D&D 5e and Pathfinder both specifically say, if you want to try and do something else out of this wheelhouse, go for it. You just have to try and roll for it, right? So if the people that are saying the new systems don't let you do anything, that's BS as far as I'm concerned as well. That's not true at all. They do say you can do those things, but there are many, many specific powers and things like that now, too. We're not going to go over too much more. Halflings, this is your typical thief, right? Essentially, you know, they're good at hiding in shadows, listening at doors. They have a missile attack bonus. This is your standard kind of, this is Bilbo Baggins. You know, this is kind of what they're disappearing from sight. They're sneaky, this kind of thing. Magic user, right? We don't have mages. We have magic users. And in fact, in the original D&D pre-BX, they weren't fighters. They were fighting men. So things have changed a lot since then, obviously. Magic users can use daggers and are unable to use shields or wear any kind of armor. Any armor. They're not allowed to wear armor, period. There's no armor for mages. Oh, and they have 1d4 hit points. So what do you think your odds are of hitting 1 hit point? Class is 25%. 25% chance. That's a pretty high chance to start out with 1 hit point. If you get hit, you're dead. That's pretty crazy. So magic users, don't get hit in battle. You're not going to live very long. This is why the fighter goes in, though. Right? The fighter comes in and he distracts the enemies and he's clanging his sword and his shield around. He's clunking around in his armor. And these enemies shouldn't be able to avoid that. They should be getting in there. Like, this fighter's dangerous. We want to get rid of him first. And the magic user sits back, casts some spells. This is the way that combat was designed right from the start. Right? We had tanks all the way from 1980, whatever this was published. 1981. Thief. Okay, so thief skills, this is a weird one for me. Thieves are, man, they really seem underpowered. And I mean, thieves have been the subject of ire in the old school Renaissance community. Not ire, but discussion. Because it's like, what were they thinking when they made thieves? Now, thieves, there's all kinds of argument videos you're going to see about, are thieves good or do they suck? And people actually having this conversation. What do they have? So they have a backstab. That's pretty damn good right from the beginning. +4 bonus to hit and doubles any damage dealt right from the start. Are you okay? So that's crazy. You know, that's pretty darn good. For a class, it's almost universally maligned. And that's a pretty good starting ability to have. Fighters don't have anything about that. And doubles any damage hit. I mean, man. So combat, because of their need for stealth and free movement, thieves can't wear armor heavier than leather. So they can wear leather. They can use any weapon. They can read languages, which is interesting. Scroll use, so they can actually cast spells from scroll. And there's a 90% chance they'll do it effectively. That's pretty high, you know, but they got to hit 10th level to do that. And by that point, they're only 4 levels away from max. So here's where things get interesting. So climb sheer surfaces. I can read languages, classy thief. Yeah, exactly. Hello, Mayo Juggler. Nice to see you. But yeah, thieves can climb sheer surfaces. So a sheer surface is a surface with, like, no handholds. So there's Spider-Man right from first level. And I want you to see something here. This is the chance of success. Climbing sheer surfaces is 87% effective at level 1. That means they have an 87% chance to successfully climb a completely sheer surface right at level 1. People often overlook this, and the reason they do, let's take a look at what the other skills are. Finding and removing traps, hearing noises, hiding in shadows, moving silently, opening locks, and picking pockets. So, for trap removal, 10% chance at level 1. There's a 10% chance they're going to remove a trap for you. That's abysmally low. That's crazy low. You know? This is where it starts to get bad for thieves at first level. You almost might as well not even try. Like, this is like life or death situation kind of stuff. Because if that thief fails, he's going to potentially set off that trap and kill himself. And if you guys have ever played Wizardry or any really old dungeon crawling PC RPG from the 80s, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Disarming that chest meant death almost every time for that thief. Don't give me any other BS, because that's exactly what would happen. It was miserable. Hear noises. So they have a 1 to 2 out of 6 chance, basically. It's a 1 or 2 on a 6-sided dice. That's not terrible. It's the same as any other class, pretty much. Hiding in shadows, 10% chance. They're particularly not great at hiding either at level 1. It's pretty miserable. Moving silently, 20% chance. Still not good, guys. And opening locks. Lock picking is abysmal at a 15% chance of picking a lock. Don't pick a lock when someone's around. You're not, the chance of you being able to do that is almost impossible. And then picking pockets, 20% chance. Now, failing a picking pocket roll, it says a roll of more than twice the percentage required for success means that the attempted theft is noticed, right? So you're not going to get noticed every time, but that is still going to be a potential problem, obviously. And it's still a huge problem. There's a 60% chance of you getting noticed, essentially, here. That's nasty. All skills except hear noise or roll on D percentage dice. Okay, so we're moving on from classes. We've covered all the classes and races. Again, classes and races are mixed, if you're just joining us here. Experience. Characters who make it through they'll get experience. Yeah, we know that. Treasure recovered and monster defeated. Those are the two sources experience come from. This is the interesting part. So they will receive XP for the amount of gold that they recover. And gold is heavy. You have to understand. So if they're dragging gold out of a dungeon, they go and they find the dwarves' lonely mountain, right? And it's full of treasure and a dragon is sleeping on it. They beat the dragon. Okay, well now what do? We got a mountain of gold here, but gold weighs, how much gold can a single guy really carry? You know, a couple of sacks? What are you going to do with all that? Where do you take it? That's a big thing here. You have to hire hirelings in D&D to carry shit for you. And pack horses. You need to keep this in mind. How are you going to get all of this treasure out of this dank, miserable dungeon? You know, you need help to do that. The game doesn't just, figure that out for you. You need to role play that and figure out how you're going to get this. And then, I got to pay guys to do this. That was all part of the experience of the game. There's a lot of logistical stuff that people playing D&D now, they may or not be introduced to that side of it. And those things are still all there in the game. I want to make that very clear, is that like a lot of this stuff is still present or expected. But it just isn't the way that people play necessarily. It's so much focus on the adventure and the story, which it should be. But we would sit there and we would hash that stuff out too. It was all, we kind of treated this like a world when we were playing growing up. And so this system kind of shows you why instinctively. If you want that experience, you got to get that treasure, man. And you got to figure out what way to get that treasure out of there in the first place. Levels get titles. So acolytes, adepts, priestesses as they go on. It's kind of like leveling up, I guess. Titles I never used, so I'm not that familiar with them. But it's interesting. And then they have high level play. Human character classes are listed at having a maximum level of 14. This range of level represents the best play experience in terms of challenge and reward, but some groups may wish to continue to extremely high levels beyond. This must be considered carefully, as demi-human PCs will be left behind due to their strict level limits. So despite the fact that they do have extended rules, as I said earlier, Dungeons and Dragons would eventually get you up to level 36 if you kept, buying that material for that system. And that is presented here. But they warn you about that because it's like the game is just going to get more and more imbalanced the further you go. Clerics require an additional 100,000 XP per level beyond 14th and gain 1 hit point per level. So you are nerfed quite substantially if you're going to do that. Yeah, wealth. Treasure can take many forms, but often the most useful form is money. Gold coins, platinum pieces, electrum, silver, copper, and then we have conversion rates for those. I don't know if these are all present in D&D currently. PCs begin to play with 3d6 times 10 gold pieces, and then you have inheritance. This is talking about your domains, and then hirelings. This is the important bit. Hirelings are NPCs hired by a character to perform certain services. Hirelings do not accompany characters on adventures. Characters may hire NPCs to join them on adventures, but they're treated separately. So hirelings are not adventurers. Hirelings are divided into types. Mercenaries that are hired soldiers. You can hire guards to guard your stronghold. Specialists who are good for helping you with specific tasks. Oh, look at that art. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that man. That's meant to be one picture, right? They're next to each other, these men. Adventuring gear. We get into the basic gear. This is just going to be standard from pretty much any game. Oil. So important to have oil and lanterns. God, oil has saved my ass so many times. Backpacks, grappling hooks, hammers, etc., etc. We don't need to get into this very much. Iron rations. Iron rations you'll see in some older PC RPGs like EverQuest use iron rations. They're better than regular rations. They are preserved longer because in EverQuest your food and your water would degrade and you needed food and water to survive and keep your stamina up and all that. Weapons and armor. So as you can see, where's all the stats for weapons and armor? Well, that's weird. That's really weird. Battle axes and clubs and crossbows and daggers and hand axes, they don't have stats. What's going on there? But leather does. Leather has AC. Shield has a +1 bonus always. So what the heck's going on? Well, we'll see later. Now here we go. Combat stats. So here's the thing. Weapons in old D&D did a base of 1d6 damage. All weapons did the same amount of damage. This, of course, presents you with the options to change that. But initially in D&D, all weapons did the same amount of damage. It was just, I guess, what you were good with and what you weren't, or those restrictions. But here, of course, we have that whole thing represented. Melee, slow, two-handed, blunt, melee, missile, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And then qualities. Talks about the different qualities of weapons. Splash weapons, two-handed, etc. We have vehicle rules, generally horses, or other kinds of mounts, of course. Depending. Warships, that sort of thing. That's all here. We do have, movement rates, base movement rate and counter movement rate to differentiate exploration from dungeon exploration, basically, or overworld exploration from dungeon exploration. Affects the hull damage. This talks about ships getting boarded and attacked and repaired and this sort of thing. So this is interesting. I've never used most of this stuff because usually I obfuscate that part of travel. We just get to the good stuff. And then we get, oh, look at that camel. That's one pretty face right there. He looks like me on a good day. Irascible animals. He's irascible. Yeah, they're kind of irascible, aren't they? Often used for transportation in desert. I'd be irascible, too, if I lived in a friggin' desert. They bite or kick creatures in their way, including their owner. They spit, but I guess that's not listed here. We'd have to make our own stats for that. Just one page. There's not much for medieval vehicles. There's not much options there. We have carts and wagons. We have tack and harness. You need to keep all these things in mind when you're buying a horse, right? And it's all here. It's all presented here. Different ships. That's pretty cool. Lifeboats, longships, historical periods. Kind of gets into that a little bit. I'm kind of glossing over this stuff. This has, to me, always been not that critical to games. It's definitely useful when you get to that part and you just reference this, but we don't need to go over it too much. Vessel movement of crew, etc. You need crew. You need to pay them. You got to get the big money, man. You get that big treasure. Get that big gold. You got to pay your boys. Pay the crew. Okay? And here's a picture of what that might look like. We have a little magical dwarf, it looks like here, and a fighter. And they're fighting some kind of serpent. It's already kicked their ass, it looks like. They got the sexy mermaid on the front. She's not going to have a good day soon. She's going to be sinking to the bottom of the sea soon. Spells. Some character classes have the ability to memorize and cast magical spells. Yes, they do. Arcane and Divine Magic is learned by deities or higher powers. Spell lists, spells in memory. You can memorize a certain number of spells to use per day, of course. Now I think spell slots in D&D, it's like you use a spell and then the spell fills a slot. So you're not restricted to like, I'm going to remember Magic Missile today. I'm going to remember an instance of this today. And you don't choose it beforehand. You just pick what you have in your spell book, you use it, and then it just fills a slot for that day that cannot be used again. And then I think if you spend a higher slot on a lower spell, depending on the spell, it will upgrade the spell, make it more powerful. Something like that. Rest and time requirements. It takes an hour to memorize all the spells characters capable of memory. So yeah, you were memorizing spells before you go on your journey for the day. That's how it works. You can duplicate spells as long as you're capable of memorizing more than one spell at the given level. So you can remember Magic Missile 5 times if you just want to use a bunch of Magic Missiles. Which if you're 10 years old, that's probably what you're going to be doing. That's what I did. When a spell is cast, knowledge of the spell is erased from the mind until it's memorized again. Okay, so that's the way magic used to work. And freedom, too. You have to be able to speak and move your hand. That's somatic and verbal. These are components, spell components. They're still there today. It's never changed. There's also, like, sort of components that you collect, right? Like, physical components, like one Eye of Newt or something like that for higher level ritual kind of spells. You need to concentrate to perform spells, and then, unless the spell description states otherwise, performing any other action or being distracted causes concentration to end. You don't get a concentration save. It's over. You lose the concentration. A guy's hacking away at you with a sword. You're not casting a spell no more. Okay? That's how it works. And I'm fine with that. That works great. It always has. But they have changed that in 5e now. Now you can make a save for that, which is also cool. Whatever. It's all good, man. Arcane spells. And then divine magic. We'll just talk about that because we're talking about clerics so much. Divine spellcasters memorize spells through prayer to their gods. Again, you have to have a god. You have to pray for your god. That's how you get your spells. Doesn't really matter what your real life beliefs are. We're playing a character in a fantasy world. So get used to it. You know, in this world, God is an objective, provable thing. Whatever god you have in the game. It's not a faith idea anymore in these fantasy worlds. You get direct intervention from gods. They directly communicate with you. You know 100% that they are real. Jack, can you close the door, please, bud? Spells and deity alignment. Lawful characters only use reverse spells in dire circumstances. Oh, yeah. So a divine spellcaster can draw disfavor from their deity when casting spells whose effects go against the deity's alignment. DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics, has the same mechanic. If you help a magic user and you're a cleric, your cleric god will disfavor you and eventually take your powers away until you do something for him or her. So it's very like, you can't do things outside of your alignment as a cleric. You have to be lawful. You have to fit your alignment and stick to that. Anyways, spell books. So you add spell books by finding them or by purchasing them. You don't just say, okay, you're level 2, you get these spells now. You have to get new spells. You have to acquire them in some way, right? The cost for spells to be recovered is 1 week game time and 1,000 GP per level if he rewrites the spell in a lost or destroyed spell book. So your spell book is a real item, and if you lose it, you're done, man. You're not casting spells anymore. That's the hard life of being a magic user in D&D. Magical research, we can create new spells, create magic items, castle. All this stuff's here, But the referee is adjudicating. So let's see. The referee will then decide what spell can be created. And if so, what level is that spell? The referee decides what items are possible to be created. So the player tells you, I want to make a ring of invisibility. And the referee decides if it's possible, what kind of materials are required, what does that actually mean, etc., etc., etc. And this is all, again, adjudication. There's not a long list of charts and parameters for this. This game expects you're going to use your judgment as a DM to say, if I let them create a ring at level 2 that lets them cast Wish, is that a great idea? Because I can tell you now the answer is no. No, it's not a great idea. Don't do that, right? But the game lets you as the DM figure that out for yourself. It doesn't force feed you, endless tables of information to go off of a strict system. Those systems are nice. They're really nice to have to guide new DMs and GMs and give you kind of like a structure or framework to look at. But in this case, they just assume you're going to figure it out. And I think that's fine. I think that's the way it should be. Nice little drawing here. So this is cleric spell lists. And it's pretty simple, right? Let's go over it quickly. Cure light wounds, detect evil, detect magic, light, protection from evil, purify food and water, remove fear, resist cold. That's first level. Remember, you don't get first level spells as a cleric to level 2. You only get one. So you have to pick one of these to use per day. Now, the DM might say you have access to cure light wounds and detect magic and protection of evil. But then as a player, you're going to have to say, okay, I'm going to remember cure light wounds for the day, and that'll be my spell for the day until I get more slots, and I can pick more. Second level, bless, find traps, hold person, no alignment, resist fire, silence 15-foot radius, snake charms. Now let's go all the way to 5th level. This is the highest level here, it looks like, for cleric spells. Commune, create food, dispel evil, insect plague, quest, remove quest, raise dead, finger of death. Interesting. You can raise the dead. So there is a system here for coming back to life, for resurrecting. That's been in there since the beginning too. That wasn't just a save your ass kind of handholdy mechanic that came in later. You could raise the dead right from the beginning, but it was generally hard. Just going back to my experience with Wizardry, for example, that is a PC game where, like, to raise the dead, you've got a percentage, and if you fail that, you get dead forever. And I think it's similar in D&D. Anyway, magic user spells, they go up to 6th level, right? And at 6th level, we're looking at stuff like move earth, part water, projected imagery, incarnation, stone to flesh, or flesh to stone. real heavy duty stuff here. Telekinesis, teleport at 5th level. But again, leveling is meant to be slower, right? It should take you a while to level up. There are some people that have been playing campaigns for 10 or more years, and they probably aren't ever going to see those higher levels. So that's something to keep in mind. That's a beautiful painting there, by the way. I love the art in this book. So let's just we don't need to go over all this, but we'll look at an interesting one. Let's look at the resurrection spell here. 4th level spell, sticks to snakes. I had a game in the setting that I run, the Cron world that I've created, and we were playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, and I had my party in a camp, and one of my party members was leaning against a wooden hut and thinking she was sneaky, trying to listen in on what was going on. She failed to notice there was someone up on a cliff above her, and that this person was a magic user. They used sticks to snakes on the whole hut. So right underneath her hand, the thing turned into snakes, and she fell on these venomous snakes and had to make a saving throw. It was really, really fun. You can come up with creative ways to use these spells. They seem like they're maybe silly, but no, that's a cool spell, man. That's my favorite spell. Sticks to snakes. I'm sticking with that. Best spell in the game. Raise Dead. This spell has 2 uses. Restore life to an accidentally or recently deceased human or demi-human, or destroy undead. Fair enough. It's just like in Final Fantasy. You use a phoenix down on an enemy and they die, right? On a zombie or something. So there's a time limit. The caster can raise a person that's been dead for no longer than 4 days per level of the caster above 7th. So a 10th level caster can revive a character that's been dead for 12 days. Okay, cool. So there are limitations here. Weakness. Returning from death is an ordeal until the subject gets 2 full weeks of bed rest. They have 1 hit point, move at half the normal rate, cannot carry heavy items, cannot attack, cast spells, or use other class abilities. So to go back to my experience with EverQuest, if you die and you are in, I forget what one of the harder places was. There was like an undead manor, something manor that we used to hang out in. If you die at the manor, you can request someone bring you back, right? But if they bring you back, you better not get into a fight right away, because you're screwed if you do. You got to sit there and wait and wait and wait till your health goes back up a bit, till your stamina gets a little better. You're like severely hindered when you get rezzed. And that's from D&D. In fact, it's way worse in D&D. Your character has to go to bed for 2 weeks. So if you're in the middle of an adventure, your character is he's your caddy now. He's carrying your swords and stuff like that. Reverse Finger of Death directs a ray of deadly magic to a single target. If a target fails a saving throw versus death, it dies instantly. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. We're going to gloss over the rest of the spells here. I think that most of these are going to be familiar to anybody that's played these games. Let's get right to adventuring. Let's quickly admire this beautiful... This is H.P. Lovecraft stuff right here. Never mind fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons. This is H.P. Lovecraft all the way. This is, God, what's that story with the brain in the jar and the Migos coming out from everywhere? This is that, man. This is what I think of. Party organization. The ideal group is between 6 and 8 characters. They expect you to have a heavy party because you need to be tough. If not enough PCs are playing, the players can hire retainers. Different than hirelings. We were talking about that earlier. A retainer is not a hireling. They do want you to mix your classes. They're going to be able to handle different situations. Characters more than 4 levels apart should venture separately. You don't want to split your party in level too fast, or it's going to be a big problem. You have to determine marching order, which we always do to this day. Basically, who gets killed by that spike trap first? Who gets that poison dart in the back? The caller. You can nominate their number as a spokesperson of the group, known as a caller. This player is responsible for informing the referee about actions and movements of the party as a whole. Delegating this role to one player rather than having each player informing the referee can speed up play. I have not read this particular rule in any of the modern rule books I've been reading lately. Anything about a caller. So that's really interesting. That's something I think that's just been abandoned, but how should I know? I don't know for sure, but that's my impression. I don't remember reading this rule for a very long time in any other book. So that's pretty cool. And they should have a high charisma score and be located near the front of the party. I don't know if I agree with that. That's kind of funny, but okay, whatever. The mapper. One player should create a map of area being explored. Now, that's changed. Okay, so the way that we look at maps is a little different now. Yes, there are people that are playing old school games, and they're really sticking to that rigid design of maps as seen in, old modules like Keep on the Borderlands, where it's literally tunnel by tunnel by room by room by tunnel by tunnel by room. But a lot of DMs now, I think, are really just simplifying this into Runehammer Games talks a lot about nodes and different ways of sort of constructing a dungeon or an adventure where you're not really thinking about things like mazes and stuff anymore. Yeah, this is a rule to accommodate an older time. It doesn't mean it's not, it doesn't mean it's obsolete. Tons of people are playing, Barrow Maze and all these massive mega dungeons that take years. This is not useless stuff by any stretch. Personally, I don't create very detailed dungeons as a DM. It's just not the way that I run my games. I like to have it sort of separated into encounters or different areas and things like that. It's different. It depends who you are. But some people would enjoy this. And people did enjoy this, and they did do it. And I did it, too, as a kid. Dividing treasure. We have to, we divide treasure evenly, and then deciding on magic items or rolling to pick the magic item first. So, see, this is brought into MMOs, right? Every MMO has been doing this pretty much right from anything after Ultima Online, I'm pretty sure, to roll for magic items. So that's kind of interesting. Or they've organized that. EverQuest just had people figure that out. And you would just sort of agree among your guild that everyone's going to stick to that system. Okay, that's cool. That's really neat. I don't know what's going on there, but that's very 70s. That actually looks like art from Sword and Sorcery cover, so I do wonder if it's the same artist. Anyways, tracking time. We've got time and weight and movement, and we talk about that. I don't know how much you guys do that. I don't do a lot of open world exploring. It's fun to do occasionally, but it seems to just boil down to rolling for random encounters. I don't know. That's another thing I tend to sort of gloss over or create interesting side quests on the way rather than worrying too much about that. I do keep a track of rations and water and things, however. Encumbrance I'm not worried about unless it's really obvious stuff. Like you're not carrying 3 Warhammers around like friggin' Skyrim or something. Checks, damages, and saves. So ability. Rolling an ability check. Player rolls 1d20. If the result is less than or equal to the ability, the checks... see, this is something I don't like about old D&D is roll under. Because it's just so foreign to the way that we naturally want to roll dice. We want to roll high. That's satisfying. We want to roll that 20. So, this works fine. I've done it lots. I would do it in this system just because that's what it says to do. And why not? But I think that can be handled better, and I think that you don't need to do this. And then modifiers, bonuses or penalties to the roll may be applied. Modifiers of -4 and +4, da. If you're going to apply modifiers, just set a target number like a 15 or 16 on your dice, and then give the player the modifier and do that, and fuck the roll under thing. You don't need to do that. But that's just me. Unmodified roll of 1 is a success, and a 20 is treated as failure, and that's, of course, inverted for combat, right? So all characters and monsters have a hit point total which represents their ability to avoid death. Many attack forms, including attacks with weapons in combat, subtract hit points from this pool. Okay. This is very simple. A character or monster reduced to 0 points or less is killed. That's it. There's no... -10, roll death number 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and then add that as a modifier on a difficulty check to see if you die. There's no 3 failures, 3 successes. There is just, you died. You got hit, and you are dead now. That is a fundamental difference here. Massive, major, important difference in these old systems and the systems today, and all of the systems today that I've played recently, even Merkborg and Dungeon Crawl Classics pad that out for you. You say, well, you're at 0 hit points, but not old D&D. You're at 0 hit points. You don't have hit points left. You're dead. That's it. You're gone. And if you're killed by a destructive spell or attack, your equipment is assumed to be destroyed. Magic items get a saving throw for destruction. Full day of complete rest. A full day, you recover 1d3 hit points for a full day. In D&D now, you get your hit die back, which you can use to heal like a small number of hit points for like a short rest. And you get all your HP back after one full 8 hours of rest. Not one day, 1 8-hour rest. You're just like 100%. You're good now. It's like that movie, The Last Action Hero, when he falls in the tar. And then the very next shot, he's perfectly clean, right? Healing. And again, I'm not doing this to make fun of the way things are done now. I think either one is fine. But I love the simplicity of this. You have 0 hit points. You're not alive anymore. Deal with it. If you're a wizard, you have no armor. You have nothing, right? That's the thing about a wizard. You have nothing to defend yourself with, essentially, except maybe like a dagger, right? And then that goblin comes up with an axe. You tell me, in real life, if an orc runs up to you with an axe and you have nothing on you, what do? You just die, okay? I mean, it is logical enough to fit in and to be consistent in this world that they've created. Is it a fantasy world? Yes. Are you fantastical? Yes. But you're a wizard. You know, you sit around and read books in a dark room all day. Your skin is pale. You're essentially like the computer nerd of the medieval era is what you are, you know. You're practically useless. As a computer guy and IT guy, and I can attest to that, I did a burpee the other day and I tore a stomach muscle. You know what I'm saying? So it makes perfect sense. Take care of your bodies. Saving throw. All characters and monsters can make saving throws to avoid the full effects of certain magical or special attacks. Yes. So there's death, poison, want, paralysis, and petrification, breath attacks, spells, rods, or staves. And what this means... I make you make when to roll a saving throw. The appropriate saving throw to make and the effects of a success or failure indicated in the description of the spell, monster attack, or adventure scenario. There are some attacks and some abilities in this game that if they are used on you, you can't avoid them. All you can do is make a saving throw, and if your character fails, he's immediately dead. That's the kind of game this was. So you have a death saving throw. It's not for when you reach 0 HP. It is for literal abilities and spells that will kill you immediately if that saving throw has failed. And I have watched characters, and I've had characters who have died because they failed one roll. That is just how it worked. And we just accepted it and moved on with our lives. One, we were traveling through an astral plane, and a character had to make sort of like a sanity check to make sure he didn't run off the side of the ship because of the stress of going through this like interplanar portal or something like that. He failed. He ran. He jumped off the ship. It was a level 6 character in AD&D 2nd edition. He died immediately. He rolled a new character, and then as soon as we got him back in the game, he failed really badly in combat, and he died again. And so he wrote up another character, and that's how we played back then. Times are changing. We're a little kinder now, but this game shows you just what a different kind of experience it was. Rolling a saving throw. No, we don't have to talk about that. That's obvious. Successful saves, enemy effects. Fails against... Oh yeah, so this is... poison doesn't like hinder you, or you get a -1. You know, a fail against poison is usually fatal. Period. Now, if you got poisoned, you just die. I mean, that's it. It's... Jeez. You know, that's brutal, right? Hazards and challenges, climbing, sheer surfaces. Well, thieves don't have a problem with that. Thieves are insanely, ridiculously overpowered in terms of that specific ability at level 1. They suck at almost everything else, but they're amazing climbers. Go figure. Darkness, infravision. So this is where they talk about infravision, like heat tones. Reading. It's not possible to read in the dark with infravision. It works within a limited range. It's disruption. It only functions in darkness, and visible light sources will disrupt it. So, geez, like, you know, infravision or dark vision is not the super OP thing that we think of it as today. And even today, people aren't doing dark vision right anyways. So even in 5th edition, dark vision is not just, you know, you see it fine and it's fine. There's specific like levels of light and things that are affected by dark vision. They do talk about that, but it's something that everybody glosses over. Falling from a height inflicts 1d6 damage per 10 feet fallen, which is pretty bad when you consider the levels of HP in this game being so low. You can lose direction, starvation, swimming, drowning, wandering monsters, 1 in 6 chance of encounters. I still use that rule today. I don't do many random encounters, but if I'm thinking of throwing a random encounter at you, I'm rolling on a 6-sided dice, and then I'm creating an encounter right on the spot. That's how it worked back then, too. Dungeon adventures. Secret doors can be spotted if they're searching, but you have a chance to search or not successfully or not. So you can miss lots of things in this game, too. But that's why, you'd make as a DM obvious things. Just make your players find it. If they search, okay, they find the thing. That's easier. It's silly to make them not find a critical piece of their success because they didn't roll the dice enough. I've never understood that. Luck picking stuck doors. You can try and force it open with strength, etc. This is nothing fancy here. Resting. Characters must rest for 1 turn every hour in the dungeon. Okay. And if characters press on without resting, they will suffer a penalty of -1 to hit and damage rolls. That's not something you see in newer systems. When exploring unknown areas of the dungeon, characters move their base movement at feet in turn. This is a very slow rate of movement, takes account for the fact that PCs are exploring, watching their footing, mapping, and trying to be quiet. This is important. And the reason I want to highlight this is because how many times have you played a game with somebody and they've said, I'm going to go in sneakily. I'm going to go in quietly. Well, you're in a dungeon. It's assumed you're going in quietly, and the rules just automatically assume you're not trying to be an idiot about things. Unless you specifically as a player say, I'm going to run in, guns blazing, Leroy Jenkins. It's assumed you're going to be taking your time here, right? The rules just assume that. If they're moving in a dungeon in areas that are already familiar, you can allow them to move at a faster rate. We all do that. That's just instinctively. Yeah, you've already been here. It's fine. We all do that. Dungeons often include hidden features such as secret. Oh, and if you don't do that, especially if you're playing grid like Roll20, you got the whole map laid out, and you make your characters go step by step through the whole thing. Oh my God, God have mercy on you. Dungeons often include features such as secret doors and traps, but they have to declare 10 by 10 foot by 10 foot area to be searched. So they can't just say, I searched this whole gymnasium. You got to specifically say, I'm going to search by this door, or search this corner, or something like that. And that's reasonable. Chance of success, if a character is searching the right location, there's a 1 in 6 chance of finding a secret door or room trap. Referee rolls. The referee should always roll for the character searching, so the player never knows if the roll failed or if there's simply no hidden features. But you can only make 1 chance to search an area. That's why you don't want to put that key in that search area. You can only have 1 chance to find it. What if he doesn't find it? I guess we just go home, right? It's over. We just go home. There are 2 kinds of traps. Treasure traps, room traps. You have a 2 in 6 chance of triggering traps. I'm guessing thieves have that chance when they try to disarm traps as well, which makes thieves extra squishy, right? Damage inflicted by a trigger trap is automatic without an attack roll. Room traps, So lots on traps here. Wandering monsters, 1 in 6 chance of fighting wandering monsters. I like that rule. Why not? Definitely higher chance of death. Wilderness adventuring. You can hunt, you can forage. I'm not going to get into this that much. Losing direction. That's interesting if you do outdoor survival kind of stuff. But, God, I don't know how you make those fun. That's a puzzle for me, even now, after playing this game for a very long time, is how in the hell do you make these interesting? I've tried it. I think I was like part successful, maybe. But even I don't even have that kind of confidence. Resting, you have to rest 1 day per 6 level. So there's definitely like some static rules. What I would do here, these rules are so simple, they're so nice, they're so easy. I would just plug all this shit into 5th edition. Unless 5th edition has simpler ones. I haven't checked yet because I kind of gloss over all this crap usually. But like this is easy stuff to even remember or just have on a sheet somewhere. You could use this for any system. I think it would work fine. Waterborne adventuring. Again, we're going to just gloss over this. It's not that interesting. Encounters. This is the good stuff. Encounter begins when the character stumble onto a monster, either because the referee planned it or because it's random. You roll for surprise. You encounter. You determine the encounter distance, how far something is away from the player characters. You roll initiative. Play out your actions. And then The turn ends. So, surprise, when to check. It's made for any side not expecting an encounter. So the monster quietly waiting does not have a chance to be surprised, but the party would. But if neither of you are, you both would be rolling that surprise check. You roll on a 1d6. 1 or 2 means you're surprised. There's simply momentary confusion if both sides are surprised. So it just cancels each other out. Kind of like advantage and disadvantage in 5e cancel each other out if you get both. No matter if you had like 15 disadvantages and 1 advantage, it would just be nothing. Nothing would happen. One side surprised. The side that is not surprised gains a 1-round advantage. The surprise side cannot act that round. Okay. That's pretty miserable if that happens to you. Encounter distance. Okay, I don't know how important that is, but they give you those measurements here. And then we get to initiative. 1d6 for each side. That's it. No, I go, and then Gimblog goes, and then Korvac goes, and then John goes. We don't worry about that. We just, 1d6, which side goes first. That's it. And then either both sides may roll again, or actions on both sides may be resolved simultaneously. So that's interesting. If you tie, you can resolve simultaneously. And there are lots of people that have surmised rules to deal with initiative just as getting rid of it completely. And this would actually kind of cover that, right? You can play a game of D&D without initiative. You just make sure that everybody's actions happen at the same time. And then if an action happens to a character and it results in that character's death and they also made an action against you, their action just doesn't happen because you killed them before it had a chance to happen. Pretty hard if you're dealing with really large combats maybe, but it's a really nice, elegant way to just nix initiative altogether, and ties kind of represent that, it looks like. Player characters' actions. Players decide how they will act. What a surprise. And then monster actions. This gets into monster reaction rolls, which are still in most systems today, I think. It gives you kind of how the monster is going to react to you. If one specific character attempts to speak with the monster, that character's NPC reaction modifier due to charisma is used. Fair enough. Common actions. There's combat. If one side attacks, casts spells, or makes tactical movement, begin tracking time in rounds, which is 6 seconds. Maybe 10 in this one. If one side decides to flee, the other side may decide to pursue. So you can run. You should run, probably most of the time. Running is something that doesn't happen very often in these games. I had 2 players recently decide to run. I was so proud of them. I was so proud that they had the good sense to run away from an encounter that probably was going to kill them. You know, they just figured out, okay, this isn't worth it. Let's get the hell out of here. Parlay. PCs can attempt to communicate with monsters. Opening encounter this way can influence the monster's behavior. If both sides decide to talk, negotiation can be role-played. Fair enough. And that happens enough, too. That happens a lot. Should happen. If one side wishes to avoid an encounter... Okay, I'll give you the logic as to why that should happen. Does anybody, any creature, unless they're really dumb and unintelligent, really want to lose their life? Probably not. What are the chances of them losing their life in a combat when they are against equal forces that are armed to the teeth? Very high for everyone, right? Yes, in an adventure story or a movie, that cockiness or that arrogance or that attitude is often going to just supersede logic. And they're just going to say, you think you can take us on, boys? I don't think so. We're way too hard for you. But, let's be realistic in a real-life situation. And this is somewhat trying to emulate, something grounded, even though it is fantasy and it's high adventure. It's also high danger at the same time. There's probably a good chance if you could speak intelligently to another creature that you could kind of chill things out a bit. Monsters, no pursuit, blah, blah, blah. So, an encounter is assumed to take at least 1 full turn to complete, including time to rest, regroup, clean weapons, bind wounds, and so on. Fair enough. And then there's evasion and pursuit. We talk about dropping treasure, line of sight, running, dropping food, obstacles, mapping, exhaustion. You become exhausted after running for 30 rounds, and you get a -2 penalty to armor class. And then you got to rest. Evasion in the wilderness, same ideas. We have fleeing group sides, and then the chances of pursuers. That's interesting. I like that table. Nice, simple, clean little table for running away. That's very cool. Oh yeah, here we go. This is some Dungeon Crawl Classics style art here. Probably the same artist that does DCC stuff. And look at this. We got this warrior and this elf lady trying to kill some little gargoyle guys. And then we got a thief hiding in a bucket. You're a thief. That's what you should be doing. You hide in the bucket till the goblin lands in front of you, and then you stick your knife in his back. That's how the game should be played. So combat. Combat sequence. Declare spells and retreats. So spells are declared at the beginning of the round, and then initiative, and then the winning side acts, and then the other side acts. So if you want to cast a spell or move when in melee, you must declare this. Other actions do not need to be declared. Initiative. Roll for the start of each round. The side with the higher roll goes first. Slow weapons. They always act last. So that's why we have those slow and those different things on our weapons, right? That still exists. Speed still exists, I think, today. Or it did in 2nd edition and does in Pathfinder, I think. Gosh, I can't actually remember now, but it certainly did in 2nd edition. That's the one I'm most familiar with. So slow weapons go last, right? Makes sense. Crossbows, I think, are especially slow. You gotta load the damn thing. It's like loading a shotgun. It's worse than that. Sorry, it's like loading a musket. It's probably more what it's like. Might be a lot faster than a musket even, though. Characters attacking with two-handed melee weapons. Always, yeah, okay. Individual initiative, optional rule. Let's just not. How's that sound? Good. Outside of melee, a character can move up to their encounter rate. I should talk about initiative quickly, why I say that. It gets really confusing when you have 15 people on a battlefield and you're doing individual initiative. That's really annoying. Now, thankfully, we have lots of nice tools, so it's become trivial, actually. If you're using Roll20, you can have initiative trackers. So then it is definitely trivial. Foundry has an especially good one as well, if you're using virtual tabletops. But having one of those stupid like magnet board things, and when I say stupid, I think they're actually really cool. I like them. I want one. But I just don't want to stick 15 magnets on it and be shifting them around every single turn or whatever, however it goes. In melee, fighting withdrawal, you can move backward up to half your encounter movement rate, and there has to be a clear path, and a retreat. Character turns and flees from melee. But the character may not attack, and the opponent gains a +2 bonus to all attacks against this character and ignores any AC bonuses due to the character's shield. Goddamn. So it's like an attack of opportunity, kind of. Missile attacks. They are possible when more than 5 feet. So you got to be at least 1 square between you two, essentially, to use ranged weapons. That goes for Starfinder, too. One of my characters in Starfinder campaign that I'm running has an ability where he can actually just club you with his pistol, right? He can use it as a melee weapon. So the way we do it is that he's shooting you with it. He's just really darn good at it, right? That's the way we play it, how we role play it. But generally that's not possible. So short range +1 bonus to attacks, medium range no bonuses or penalties, and then it gives you the ranges on the item, and then -1 penalty to attack rolls on long range. But the ranges on these things are insane. So you're probably not even going to meet that on a gridded map. Often it's like 300 feet or something like that. So unless you have like a massive grid you're playing on, that's more of a theater of the mind thing. That thing's running away from you. He's by the trees. He's over there. Targets behind cover. The target can't be hit under complete cover. And then partial cover has attack penalties between -1 and -4. And that's similar for D&D 5. There's like -2 and -4, I think, for partial and regular cover. That might be Pathfinder. But in one of those systems, it's the same idea. Spellcasting, we have to be able to speak and move your hands. When casting a spell, no other actions may be taken in that round. You cannot move if you're casting a spell in one round. And then a line of sight, you have to have line of sight, essentially, visible to the opponent. And then disrupting spells, same idea. We've already talked about that. So melee attacks are possible within a 5-foot range. So right, you're adjacent to an opponent, and if you're using a grid, adjacent to an opponent rather. And then we just repeat that. 1s and 20s. 20s always hit, 1s always miss. Where's critical damage? Well, it's not a thing. It's just 20s are always a hit, even if something's AC is like 26 or whatever. You're always going to hit it on a 20. 1s always miss. There's no critical fumble. There's none of that stuff. We've added that stuff later as time goes on. Other systems have added that. Critical rolls, I think, are canon now in 5e. We've always house ruled that to be... I've house ruled crits since AD&D, and that might have even been AD&D. I just can't remember right now. Invulnerability, some monsters are immune to certain attacks, and even if an attack hits, damage does not roll. Okay, fair enough. Attacks per round, they attack once per round, but some monsters have multiple attacks. Attacking and movement can be combined in the same round, just not attacking and spells. So for the attack rolls, roll 1d20, apply modifiers, determine hit AC using either the matrix or the ascending AC value. If the AC is equal, blah, 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 we roll for damage. And then they talk about the specific AC ascending rules here as well. which people are going to be more familiar with than descending. Descending is going to be weird for most people now. Rolling for damage. Inflict 1d6 damage. This is what I was talking about. PC attacks inflict 1d6 damage. Doesn't matter what your weapon is. But they do give you the option, and that's down here, variable weapon damage, optional rule. You can prefer that different weapons inflict different amounts of damage. In that case, PC attacks inflict the same damage indicated for the weapon in the equipment list. So that is covered. If you want to do that, that is optional. And I would assume most people enjoy that. I like variable damage personally, but that's just me. Character or monster reduced to hit 0 hit points or less is killed. They've talked about this a few times now. Other combat issues, attacking from behind, AC bonuses from shields are negated. That's one to keep in mind. Blind characters are unable to attack. Flying characters can drop things on your head. There are invulnerabilities. Paralyzed opponents. Helpless opponents, such as those paralyzed or frozen, can be automatically hit in melee and only roll for damage is required. You don't even worry about AC if that's the case. Spacing. Normally, most 2 to 3 characters can fight side by side in a 10-foot wide passageway. That makes perfect sense. That's how you do it on a grid. Characters that wish to subdue an intelligent opponent must announce that they are attacking without the intent to kill. So we do have subdual damage here as well, which we just kind of talk. Am I hitting him with a blunt object? If I get him down to 0 with a blunt object, then he can have a chance to surrender. Unarmed attacks. Unarmed attack combat is handled the same as melee combat. Unarmed attacks inflict 1d2 damage modified by strength, and I would keep that. I wouldn't do 1d4 with a fist if a knife does 1d4. Let's just keep it at 1d2. That makes sense to me. Characters on an unstable surface, such as a ship, they're going to suffer penalties. Of course they will. And then underwater fighting. Missile weapons don't work at all, basically. Fair enough. Morale. We have morale ratings for monsters, and we do morale checks. That makes sense for most intelligent creatures to do that, I think. I can't imagine a group of thugs paid, in silver that have come to, beat up or kill one of your party members. If one of them got killed, the rest are running away. And that's how real combat works much of the time. Not to get too philosophical, but once real severe violence is taking place, people are generally shocked by that. They generally calm down. This is why soldiers have to train so hard to desensitize, so that when they see real death in a combat, they aren't immediately paralyzed by it. I mean, it's an astoundingly shocking experience to be in to see real violence happen. And most people are kind of backing off when the blood starts to shed. And I don't think that would be much different even in a fantasy setting or a medieval setting. I mean, they're probably more used to it, but if you see one of your buddies get his head chopped off, I'm out of there, man. I'm booking. What's the point? Why am I going to hang out here with these guys? Mercenaries have morale as well, depending on what kind of troop type they are. Retainers signed up to work as adventurers, so are not frightened off at the first sign of danger. So retainers are not the same as hirelings. Retainers know they're going into dangerous situations. They know they're going into extreme peril. And we're going to get to them very soon here. Combat tables, this is what I'm talking about, the combat matrices. This over here, the bracketed side gives you the ascending AC values for hitting. And then over here, you've got all the attack rolls to hit ACs, -3, -2, etc., etc. Hired help, retainers. This is important because retainers are a valuable part of the party, especially if you don't have a full party. Retainers are NPCs hired by adventurers to accompany them on the adventurer. There's a limit each PC can have for retainers. Each character is limited to a finite number of retainers according to their charisma score. Retainers are not mindless slaves. They will usually share the party's risks, but they're not willingly going to act as battle fodder. You're not going to get your retainer to stick his arm in an obvious trap. They're not going to do that. If abused in any way, they'll warn others of this, and the PCs will find it difficult to hire other retainers. Be nice to your retainers. They're going to help you out at the end of the day, but be nice to them. Retainers can be of any class, including normal humans effectively at level 0, but must be of equal or lower level to the hiring PC. You're not going to hire a bunch of 8-level retainers at level 1. Potential retainers may be located by frequent drinking establishments or by paying to post notices of help wanted. This is where taverns come into play, the original bulletin boards. Applicants are recruited through negotiation with the referee playing the roles of the NPCs a character attempts to hire. The PC should explain what the job entails and the wages paid. The referee should determine the rate of pay desired by potential retainers, taking the following factors into account: skill level, competition, etc. Now, I want to talk about retainers quickly and how to quickly make a retainer as a DM. Just have templates lying around, very, very simple stat sheets that will just like a bunch of level 1 or level 2 or whatever characters. Jackie, shh. And what you want to do is think of a movie like Predator or Aliens or something like that, where you got a crew and you know most of those crew are going to be expendable. Most of them are going to die. And then just model your character after that guy. You give him a name, whatever it is. Fringo, John Bringus. It doesn't matter, right? But that's how you can very quickly just come up with retainer type characters. Okay? So that's my hint on how to make them. There's upkeep for them. You got to pay their upkeep, food and lodgings. You got to share treasure with them. You got to pay them. Makes sense. And there's a whole bunch of other things like that. If they accept your offer, if they don't, if they're angry at you, a -1 penalty applies to further hiring reaction rolls while recruiting in the same town or area. Experience penalties. They receive penalized experience. When a normal human gains XP, they must choose an adventuring character class. Okay, so because level 0 retainers, and it's the same as running level 0 characters in Dungeon Crawl Classics. They don't have a class yet. They might have a profession, but they don't have a class. They're not anything yet, really. Loyalty, they have a loyalty rating, loyalty checks, when to check loyalty, and so on. Mercenaries. They're hired to perform specific services. They're not retainers. This is, again, when we're talking about hirelings, and specialists are also hirelings. We go over the different kinds of specialists here, like armorers, blacksmiths, spies, etc. Oh, wow, look at that. Another really beautiful piece of art here. That was very Conan-esque or very, Frank Frazetta kind of thing going on. Boris Vallejo, those kind of artists. Stronghold construction. This it tells you how to design structures, strongholds, building in towns. That's something you could role play for hours if people were into it. By the way, it can be fun with the right party. I will say that with the right people, that can be a lot of fun. People that are really interested in that kind of logistical thing. And then of course we get into monsters, right? And then the monsters are described by the following stats: AC, hit dice, which is D8s in this case, to determine their hit points. Some are fractional hit dice, so like 1/2, which is a 1d4, and then averages, so you can just pick they just have this many hit points. Attacks usable per round, how many attacks they get per round, because many monsters have multiple attacks. Saving throw values for monsters, those are important too, especially if you're a magic user fighting monsters or have poison on a sword or something like that. And then they have their attack roll and their movement rate. Morale, alignment, XP award, what you get for defeating them, number appearing. These are going to be wildly more than what you'd expect depending on what kind. Like, I think in AD&D, you could run into a group of 1 to 100 goblins. Now, that didn't mean in one place, generally speaking. That might mean one layer. So maybe this entire dungeon, I'm going to roll a D100 and then there's going to be 60 goblins in there in total. It doesn't mean I'm going to run into them all, but this is like a general way of helping you to populate areas with monsters. Wandering monsters, etc. is all covered here. Treasure types, what kinds of treasures you can find, or what kind of treasures monsters have. I have another way of doing this when I create monsters where I'll just say like rich or poor or broke if it's like an animal type monster. And then the DM can kind of determine what treasure they're going to get. Infravision. All non-human monsters have infravision unless specified. 20% of intelligent monsters speak common. So some monsters can speak languages like common. Goblins, kobolds, probably, those sorts of things. Persons. Includes all humans and demi-humans. Okay. And then monster descriptions. Here we go. Let's get to something familiar here. We have bears, grizzly bears, black puddings, bugbears, carcass crawlers, cat great. This is a whole monster manual in the one book here, by the way. You could get away with just using this. And the stats are so simple that it's really, really, really easy to just, boom, make a monster in, a couple of minutes. Black dragons. Here we go. AC 2. 17 to hit if you're doing ascending. 31 HP. 2 claws, 1d4 plus 1. 1 bite, 2d10, or breath weapon. Thaco's there, the movement's there, etc., etc. It's chaotic alignment. XP, 1250 XP. A 60-foot long line of acid for its breath weapon, which is absolutely evil. And again, breath weapons have saves, so if you fail to save, guess what happens? In this case, you probably just get melted. Oh yeah, there we go, another one. Beauty. Beautiful. Dragons, dwarves. I want to get to something really familiar, like, oh, there's gelatinous cubes. Gotta love gelatinous cubes. One of my other favorite enemies in the game. Gnolls. Goblins, here we go. Small, grotesque humanoids. 13 AC if you're going ascending. Not that hard to hit. Still less than 50% chance you're going to hit it. 1 minus 1, so on average 3 HP. 1 weapon, which is 1d6 or by weapon. So keep in mind, a goblin that is fighting a mage still has an extremely good chance of just killing them in 1 hit, right? So they're still not to be underestimated, even though they're a weak enemy. You only get 5 XP from them. They hate the sun. They don't like to go out in full daylight, and they get penalties for that. Wolf Riders. We're going all the way back to Hobbit here with this one. They're not wargs, but they're wolves. They hate dwarves. They attack them on sight. That's interesting. They just have specific personality traits listed here. Then they've got goblin layers and kings and bodyguards. They only have type treasure of sea. So just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go over too much of this. I'm going to vastly... oh, here we go. Yeah, that's another really nice piece of art there. The Mummy. Where's Brendan Fraser? Oh, there he is. Neanderthal. That's an Encino Man joke, by the way. It's not making fun of Brendan Fraser. He was an Encino Man. Look it up if you haven't seen it. Okay, orcs, same idea. They're about the same to hit. HD1, a little bit tougher than your goblins. And then they've got more information below them. And so on and so on and so forth. We're not going to have the Wizards of the Coast owned creatures in here, like beholders. They're not in here. Oh, that's amazing. Look at that. Look how evocative this is. This is 80s fantasy stuff here. 70s, 80s fantasy. This is not, modern high fantasy. This is old school, man. It's beautiful. Let's keep going. So this is where we have our encounter tables. And that's, you can use the table. I'm not going to sit here and read tables, but it gives you an idea of what kind of tables you will get, what kind of monsters you will encounter. More wilderness tables, what sort of things you're going to find in the wilderness. Encounter sub-tables of city settled, desert, hills, mountains, forests, clear grasslands, jungle, etc., etc. Another beautiful painting here. NPC encounters. What kind of encounters are you going to run into? What kind of NPCs? This is all just random tables you can use or ignore completely. You don't need to use these things, but they're here. And then this is, of course, strongholds. And it gets... Oh, wow, look at that one. Gets into those details. Here we go. Running adventurers. I'm gonna go over this. Let's see. Preparation. We should plan your adventure. This is obvious stuff. Improvisation. It's impossible to predict every player's possible action. Players will come up with ideas the referee has not even considered. And that's the fun of the game, everybody. Not running a static adventure that doesn't change. Not running something predictable. This is where it gets fun. This book provides those procedures to running for many common adventuring situations, but you should feel free to adapt and change things. The balance. A referee must maintain a fun balance of risk and reward, of course, naturally. Neutral judge. You're supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to be fair. You're not against the players. It's not a competitive experience. It's a cooperative experience between not only the players, but the players and the DM. You're telling a story together. Arbiter of rules. The referee has to decide how and when to apply the rules to the game by using rulings. They are not rules. They are rulings. The referee has to decide right now. What is this rule? If I don't know off the top of my head, I got to make it up right now. Resolving actions. When a player wishes to do something not covered by a stand-in rule, the referee has to consider how to determine the outcome. Sometimes it can simply be dealt with by deciding what would happen, and a lot of times that's what it should be. And it's not a lot of the times. When I see people playing games on YouTube and stuff, Every 1 second, roll a check, roll perception, roll this, roll that, roll for that, roll for that. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that to determine if a thief can climb up a 1-story building. They just do it. You know, there's very simple things that just you don't need to roll. Me and my friend Matt were talking about that just today, where he wants to do something really creative. He's got a really cool idea of something he wants to try. And then his DM just says, okay, you get advantage. Well, it's like, I didn't want to do it to get advantage on a roll. I want to see you narrate it as a DM. I want you to tell me what happened when I did that thing. Did it work? What was it like? How did the goblin respond? That's what the players is going to excite the players. Giving them a bonus 4 points is not exciting. You know, it's just statistically you have a 10% better chance of doing that. How is that exciting? This is not what D&D is. It's not a board game. It's not Warhammer. And I love those games and I love Warhammer, but it's not that. It's about creating an adventure and a story in your head together as a group of people. And then afterwards you have a beer or you have a decompression talk where you talk about the game and what went well and what didn't and what they would have wanted to see. And that's exactly why this is one of the best GM portions of a book ever, because it just says that right off the bat. It's just very clear in that. It's not even concerned about the rules. It's like, just throw them away. It doesn't matter. Tell the player the chances, let them decide whether to take the risk or not, if they're going to do something. And you want to tell them. You know, you don't want to be like, I saw a post today about a scenario that didn't happen, but where it was like, oh, you're falling off a cliff, and the dwarf goes, I'm going to try and flop my arms hard and fly. Okay, do it. And then their guy rolls a D20, and he rolls a 20 natural. He goes, somehow you flop your arms and start flying. And everybody laughs. That's, you know, I get it. It's funny. If you're playing a Monty Python-esque game, maybe that's fine for your group or whatever. But that's not what a 20 on a D20 means. You know, it's just it doesn't even mean you succeeded on a high DC check. DC checks in 5th edition, 30, 40, you know, 30 is like almost impossible. Pathfinder, it's probably even more than that. But it's not like 20 just automatically lets you do anything and defy the laws of nature. No. You want to tell your player, if you're going to try and jump this gorge and flap your wings, and you're a dwarf in plate armor, nothing is going to happen. You're going to die. You want to just be honest, you know, about that, basically. Disagreements. Players may not always agree with the referee's application of the game. That's fine. When this happens, the group should briefly discuss the point of disagreement and come to a decision. We're adults here. You know, we can work together. We can figure it out. There's a funny thing where it's like the simplest RPG ever is just the player says what they want to happen. The DM and the players discuss it and decide if it happens or not. That's like the simplest form of an RPG. Nobody even rolls dice. You know, and it's essentially what this game boils down to. It's a game of imagination and cooperation. We should be able to discuss things like adults, figure it out. If I'm the DM and I need to come up with something right now, I shouldn't let that drag down the game. I should just come up with a ruling right now. Boom, it's on the table. It's done. And then later I can go back through the rules, read it up and say, oh, it was actually supposed to be done like this. Well, maybe I'm going to house rule where we don't do it like that. Or next time I will do it like this. And that's how things should be dealt with. Randomness, they should make judicious use of die rolls, random tables, etc. While these can add an element of fun and unpredictability to the game, overuse of randomness can spoil an adventure by derailing it too much. Extremely important. And this is something most people seem to miss for some reason. Rate of advancement, standard. After 3 to 4 sessions, it's normal for a PC to go 7. 3 to 4 sessions. A lot of people now, it's like that same session or the end of that session, they're leveling up already. This game gives you a much slower kind of pace for that. But, you know, that's between the players and the DM, and we can decide that standard or fast or slow kind of games. And systems like Morkborg give you mechanics to kind of do that for you, which is great. They have the Psalms in there where you roll a dice of your choosing for each game day, and every time you roll a 1, a new psalm is read, and when 7 psalms are read, the game ends no matter what, because the world ends, right? So you can decide, is that a D2? Is that a D4? Is it a D20? D100? A D1000? You and your players get to decide how long is it going to take for our campaign to end using this system as a way to kind of like keep like a ticking clock is what they call it. There's a ticking clock always there. The world can end any time. If I stay in town for 1 week to study something and I'm rolling a D4 every game day of that week, you know, that's an amazingly high probability for my psalm count to go up by at least a couple points. You know, and then we're almost to the end of the world after 1 week of rest. So maybe we just carry on instead. Character knowledge. We're talking about metagaming here. Referee may have to remind players, you don't know this. Your character doesn't know this. Maybe you do, your character doesn't. Grudges. They can develop grudges or rivalries. Oh, it's natural and fun part of good role-playing, yes. And the referee should ensure that such grudges do not dominate play and spoil the adventure for others. This is the whole party kills each other. Let's discourage this. This isn't fun in the end. It's important that the referee keep the game challenging even when player characters reach high levels. I won't go over these with a fine-tooth comb, but I'll just say, yeah, you know, obviously. We want to keep things challenging, even if we do play high levels. Describing the unknown. Be careful to keep an air of mystery. Only describe what the characters see, hear, smell, and so on without providing any additional information. I break that rule a bit if I have background that I think the players are going to know instinctively. Oh, they know what this symbol means or something like that, right? But that's not really what this is saying. We want to keep mystery here. Monsters should be described rather than referred by name. My monsters I create don't even have names. If they do, only I know about them ever. Forever. They never get to see the stats. They never get to see what the monster looks like. 1, because I'm terrible at drawing. 2, because whatever they are going to imagine is going to be 100 times scarier than anything I could put on a piece of paper. As much as I like art, especially in monster manuals, I have considered publishing my own monster book with just general stats that can be used in any system and no pictures at all. Just so that, you know, to emphasize that fact. And in fact, it's probably the only thing I could publish because I can't draw. Surprise attacks. When their characters are attacked by surprise, the ref should describe the attack itself rather than giving the complete description of attacking the monster. Character might just see a clawed hand reaching out of the shadows. Only in subsequent comment rounds should a more detailed description of the monster be provided. And it's like Alien, man. We keep the alien a secret. We don't let you see much of the alien. And then when we do see it, it's like, holy shit, what is that, right? The Predator. Whatever. Monster and NPC game stats should never be revealed. Absolutely. Duh. Magic items should only be described rather than referred to by name. That's fantastic because the name tells you what the item is, right? So we're going to say, oh, you found this box. It's a boat of folding. We're going to say, you found this box and it has 3 words inscripted on the back. Klaatu Verata Nikto, right? And then the players are like, okay, Klaatu Verata, you know, and then they get to discover what this thing does. It could just fucking kill them, but they don't know that. You don't want them to know that. Let them figure that out on their own. Let them die from a magical potion that they just decide to quaff without knowing what it is. Oh, sorry, it was acid, you know. I mean, don't just do that to screw them, but you know what I'm saying. Keep it mysterious so that they can put the work into earning that just past finding it in the dungeon and then using it all of a sudden. Oh, I found a bunch of health potions. The usual procedure to draw maps of areas being explored based on the referee's descriptions. Squares. Everybody knows about squares now. Everybody uses squares. Pathfinder D&D talks about squares. Pathfinder specifically shows you examples of combat in squares. D&D just sort of, you know, obfuscates that. It really promotes theater of the mind, which I love. But that's a great way to do it if you're going to do it on a map. Do squares. You can do measurements as well. Squares are just faster. They're faster. I've thought about just using a ruler because I like Warhammer so much, you know. But it's just easier to use squares. Known areas. Sometimes characters may already know the shape of an area being explored. Yeah, so you can give them a basic map or whatever. Just don't give them what's in the map, you know. Give them a nice, like, tea-stained parchment with a shitty map drawn on it. That's the map you get. It might even be wrong. That's another good way to kind of play the game is give players misleading information from time to time. Just because they hear a rumor doesn't mean it's true. Using miniatures. Some groups like to use miniatures. And then, you know, erasable pens, grid, da-da-da-da-da-da. I like miniatures too. But I like to keep them reserved for only big combats. Or that end encounter of the game. The rest can be done theater of the mind. It all can. Monsters and NPCs. Referees are responsible for deciding how monsters and NPCs react when encountered and what schemes and tactics they follow. Okay. Guards, magic items. Monsters will use any magic items in their lair to thwart the PCs. That's cool. Adaptation. Monsters may copy or adapt tactics successfully used by PCs and may plan specific counter maneuvers. We're talking about longer term combats here. You've invaded a goblin's dungeon. You got to go back there someday. They know who you are. They know what you're doing. That's pretty cool. I like that. Role playing. The referee should consider the monster's reaction to negotiations with PCs, bearing in mind its alignment and personality. Monsters should not always cooperate with PCs' wishes. No shit. Monsters and NPCs may be encountered with friends, minions, or retainers. This will come to the aid of the monster or may avenge it if it is defeated. Okay. And then adventure scenarios. Adventure hooks, essentially what it's talking about here. Banishing ancient evils, clearing ruins, contacting lost civilizations, etc., etc. Look at this. Look at that. That's awesome. He's got a nice effigy in his name. This really, I don't know why this reminds me, even though it's dwarves here, it's like it reminds me of the wood elf scene from the Hobbit cartoon for some reason. Designing a dungeon, designing the farm and the basic blah, 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 blah. Choosing monsters, mapping the dungeon. Very good, useful stuff. I'll be honest with you, I just kind of wing all of this now. I don't really use a lot of this information just because how many dungeons have I been through and how many different kinds of games, right? So you got to feel for things after a while. Choosing wilderness, mapping the region. I don't do that as much. I'm starting to now because I'm starting to create a more larger scale world. So this is actually going to come in handy for me when I get to this. But I'm just going to gloss over it here because this is all, in every game ever. Designing a wilderness. Designing a base town. Okay, interesting. So design a base town. Wording XP. This is okay. So all characters who return from adventure receive experience points, and it's gained from two sources: treasure recovered and monsters defeated. Treasure the PCs bring back from an adventure is the primary means by which they gain XP. Let that burn into your brain. That's the primary method of XP, not monsters. It accounts for 3/4 or more of the XP earned. Characters gain 1 XP per 1 gold piece. So you find 100 gold in a dungeon, boom, 100 XP. Magical treasure does not grant XP. Okay. Defeated monsters. They also grant XP. There's base XP for them. Higher HD monsters grant more XP. Extraordinarily peril bonuses. And you got a table for XP rewards there. Division of XP, awards for treasures recovered and monsters defeated are totaled and divided evenly between all characters who survived the adventure. Awarded XP is always divided evenly, even if the treasure is not divided evenly. So if I take 200 gold and you take 50, we get 250 experience and we split that between the two of us. Make sense? Referee may optionally grant XP bonuses to players who did particularly well. I do that. Likewise, players who did not do their share of the work may be penalized. I don't do that personally, but they'll just got less experience. So I don't need to penalize them. That's the penalty. They just get less experience. They don't get that reward at the end. Treasure types. We got a whole bunch of treasure types here. Holy smokes, right? Magic items. I think a lot of these are going to be familiar. You got armors, shields, miscellaneous items, potions, and blah, 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 blah. Identifying. So you can test an item by sipping a potion, donning a suit, and whatever. Players may risk to use retainers as guinea pigs, so they directly kind of contradict themselves to test magic items. Retainers may agree to do this, but only if allowed to keep the item in question. Oh, that's great. So, yeah, test this. I never get it back. So I guess you could give it to your retainer, have him test it, kill him. Now you're evil. Now retainers won't want to follow you. Now someone puts a bounty on your head because they know that you're killing their retainers. Oh, that creates a story all in itself. High-level NPC magic users may also be able to identify magic items. They'll always require payment or service in kind. So that's the kind of thing that you would get those hirelings to do, I suppose. Process takes time, possibly several weeks. Things are measured in days and weeks here. It's expected that between adventures, you're hanging out somewhere for like a month sometimes. Appropriate use of an item. In order to be effective, magic item must be used, held, or worn after the normal fashion. Concentration. Some items grant wishes. Wishes are generally regarded as the most powerful magic in the game and have the potential to greatly upset the balance of play. Don't give them wishes. Or give them wishes as a specific story event. That's my opinion. But anyway. gems and jewelry, and then we have the gem value, what it's worth. This is an easier way to give players more rewards without having to bog them down in the logistics of how to carry 1,000 gold pieces around. You can give them more gems and things like that. And then there's of course your whole like slew of magic items: boots of speed, crystal ball, displacer cloak, a 3D bottle, elven cloak and boots, flying carpets, helmet teleportation. Awesome fun stuff. We've seen this a million times before. Ropes of climbing. Okay, here we go. That's very nice. Smoking a hookah there. Mixing potions. We have different kinds of potions. What the percentage will be. Oh, don't drink a poison potion. Bad idea. Points of eluded, potion of diminution, potion of ESP, potion of fire resistant, flying, gaseous form, healing. I think gaseous form, I want to see how that works. It comes a cloud of vapor. All your equipment and clothing drops to the floor. Attacking is not possible. AC is -2. Or 21. Potion of healing. Healing a living subject. 1d6 plus 1 points of damage. It's actually quite a bit. It's not bad. I think it's 1d4 times 2 for healing in D&D now or something. And potion of heroism. Potion of speed. Levitation poison. Effect causes death. The poison just causes death. That's the effect. Even a sip has the full effect. So even if you get a retainer to test that potion, if it's poison, he just dies if he fails that save. Pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. Okay, rings. Oh, look at this. This is so nice. All the different styles in here are beautiful. Rods, staves, wands. Let's kind of go through this. Weapons, sword +1, energy drain. You know, this is standard kind of stuff. There's a lot in here. I mean, you know, people that are saying like these games are more limited. There's a ton of stuff in here, man. You could get this one game for decades, and you got everything to work with. Yeah, fighters don't get a million different powers and stuff, but at a high level play, it's not going to matter anymore. You're into the role play of it, you know? No, don't touch this. You're going to die if you touch this. That's what he's warning Big Boy here. And then the author's notes, we're at the end now. I mean, that's it. So the author talks about ambiguities and omissions. You know, they wanted to increase the playability of the game, so he decided to iron out such ambiguities in the rules. Stay as close as possible to the original text, but fix some of the things that were broken. That makes perfect sense to me. I love it. And then ability checks. Original rules are somewhat ambiguous on whether ability checks are an optional rule or not. They are specified as an optional rule in Expert, but recommended for use in climbing. The original basic rules do not specify ability checks as an optional rule. On balance, I decided against specifying ability checks as optional. Their application is, of course, still entirely up to the referee, as is everything. Everything is optional. That's the whole point. Encumbrance, talk about retainers and traps and movement in common and morale, etc., etc., etc. So we got this is a really amazing book. I'm not going to go through it any more than that, except to just finish up with this beautiful picture. Let's end on a good note here. And I'll just, boom, finish up this really long video by saying that Old School Essentials is the best representation of the old school D&D that I have seen so far. It's not that far removed from others. There's basic fantasy and swords and wizardry, and they each do their own unique things, but they're very close to this system. I think you could pick up this. You could pick up White Box. You could pick up swords and wizardry. You could pick up Labyrinth Lord. You could pick up basic fantasy. Lamentation of the Flame Princess is a different story a little bit, but you could pick up pretty much any one of these systems and have a good time. But Old School Essentials is definitely the most well organized. It's got the nicest product line, the way that they split the books up. Keep in mind, I don't have that version because I'll be mostly playing through online play anyways, or just using the book as reference material. But it's just an incredible product. So I wanted to go through it and talk about it as a D&D 5e player, a new one. Maybe talking to other people that are D&D 5e is your bread and butter. That's what you play primarily, and maybe you're not even familiar with the old system. We have some incredible differences here, but we have really clear set of simple rules. Easy to reference, easy to flip through. Huge emphasis on DM intervention, DM adjudication, right? So I want you to keep in mind, like the core philosophy of these old books is the DM and the players coordinate with each other and collaborate. I'm going to leave the video there. I want to thank the people that came in and said hello on the stream. I'm recording this video on stream because it's just too big to put on my hard drive, and I can export it and put it on YouTube after this. So it'll be on my YouTube channel. But thank you for watching. Go get Old School Essentials by Necrotic Gnome. You can get a free version of the rules online, and they're amazing. You can get the book. Get the book. The book's amazing. It's a little hardcover, little ribbon, bookmarks, and all that. It comes with the PDF. Look how great this PDF is. I really love this system, and I think that you'll love this system too if you give it a chance. Great for a one-shot, maybe if you're used to playing a long-term game of D&D or something like that. Bring this to the table one night. Say, hey guys, let's do something different. Okay, so this has been a fun time. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.